Good evening, everyone. I'm Jennifer Keller, the Programming Coordinator of the Westport Library. And on behalf of tonight's program partners, the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants, the Westport Weston Interfaith Clergy, the UN Association of Southwest Connecticut, the Westport Weston Interfaith Council, and the Congregation for Humanist Judaism, welcome to this evening's event. There are tables in the forum here tonight for information about some of these partners, so I hope you'll check that out. Also, if you're interested in another refugee immigrant story, we are doing another program on November 29th as well. So pick up one of our magazines. This is so cool. This is the first time I'm picking one up during my introduction. Okay, sorry. Pick up one of our magazines and look for us online at westportlibrary.org. So we just are so excited to have tonight's guest, especially with everything that's going on. And we know that Westport has helped refugees in the past and will continue to do so. So we're so happy tonight to have Mondiant Dogon to discuss Those We Throw Away Are Diamonds this evening. For those watching at home, please feel free to ask questions at any time during this conversation in the Q&A tab that'll be found at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you who are here, we will take questions at the end of the conversation and ask that you would go to the microphone that's on that side of the forum so that folks at home can hear your question. Also, for those of you at home, those of you here, please silence your cell phones, which is another thing I haven't had to say in a long time, so I'm very excited. Now to the main attraction. Many Westporters know our moderator, the Reverend Dr. John Morehouse, Senior Minister of the Unitarian Church. He has been an avid social activist on issues that impact under-resourced communities. Since coming to Westport, his congregation has partnered with CIRI and other communities supporting immigrant and refugee populations, including setting up apartments for newly arrived refugees. Mondiant Dogon is a Congolese author, human rights activist, and refugee ambassador. He left his home village at age 3 and has lived in refugee camps since 1996. In 2017, he was able to leave Rwanda to attend New York University. And since this is his book, Those We Throw Away Are Diamonds, is his story, I'm going to let him tell you about it.
Well, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you folks who are online for tuning in. We are very happy. I am honored to be here in the conversation with Mondiant. We have so much to talk about. I actually finished the book, which I'm told by the author doesn't happen yet because it isn't really out, but it's out now. And I want to start our interview by saying your responsibility is to buy the book and read it. I think that's very important to do. We are going to talk about a lot of things tonight. The story is compelling, heartbreaking, but also inspiring and full of courage and perseverance. It's a story of his life, his family, having to flee Congo and to go into Rwanda, going back into Congo for a while as a teenager, back into the refugee camps in Rwanda, and then eventually a very long and beautiful and poignant story about how he finds his way here to the United States, where he studied at NYU. Mondiant, I would like to begin by asking you, given this incredible story, which has surviving massacres and surviving bureaucrats, can you tell us what was it that made you persevere through all these years to get to this point in your life?
Thank you so much, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. I want to say thank you so much for the library, and thank you so much to everybody who were able to come and attend this event. And thank you so much to the Dr. John Morehouse. So thank you so much for everybody, even on Zoom. I think there are people who are following us. So I think the reason why, as I said, as Jenna introduced me, I was born in Congo, in Democratic Republic of the Congo in 1992. And we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water, so but life was more beautiful. My dad was a chief of a village where he was a respected man in the village, but when I was only 3 years old, my family was forced to flee the country due to the genocide against Tutsi from Rwanda that spilled over into Congo. So since 1996, I've lived in refugee camps. So the reason why I think when you're a child, when you are 5 years old, and when you live through war or that kind of violence for like a year or 6 months, you become as wise as somebody who is 25. So the reason why is because I think the reason why I had that kind of perseverance is because since I was 3 years old, I grew up in that kind of situation where I saw a lot of people dying next to me, and tomorrow I say, I'll be me. I'm dying next day. So with that kind of life, I didn't have hope to live the following day. So with that kind of fear and say, you know, my best friend Celestine, my best friend Patrick died. So for me, I was expecting also to die the following day. So no other power. I was not strong to survive or to live, but it was just to, you know, say, let me wait tomorrow. I will die tomorrow. So things like that. So no other power.
So there was a real immediacy to everything that you were doing, because death was always so close to you that you just pushed on to the next day and pushed on to the next day. Could you tell us a little bit about the title of the book, Those We Throw Away Are Diamonds? I know it comes from a poem, but maybe you could explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think Those We Throw Away, it was not my first, it's not the first title I proposed. When I started writing when I was in high school. So in refugee camp, we had this kind of organization, event organized by the UN and other aid organizations. And for me, I wrote a poem. I was a really good poet. And I wrote because I want to win pen or paper or a very small prizes. So when I wrote, a lot of people say your poem was good, but the poem I wrote was about, you know, it was showing the problems of refugees, the limitation we had as refugees in Rwanda. And when I went to high school, Rwandan high school, I had a lot of limitation. I was one of the best students in the country. When I went to the best university of Rwanda, the ministry of the university told me, Dogon, you are not allowed for financial aid because you are a refugee. I came back in refugee camp. So with all those kind of limitations, I said, if I write, the first title was Wound of Dams, because in refugee camp, everybody's silent. So there is kind of silence. Nobody want to share their story or what they've been through. So I say, I don't want to bring that kind of negativity. I want to try to find something positive. I want to tell the world that those they throw away a diamond. So that's how I came up with this title, where I say, I'm not going to bring the negativity or negative stuff into what I'm doing. I want to start bringing something very positive. That's why I call the refugee a diamond. And
so many refugees have been thrown away. I mean, if you look at the world, as you said at some point in the book, that refugees are the forgotten people. They're the people that nobody cares about after a certain period of time. People would wonder, is that camp still there? Or is 25 years later? I can't believe these folks have not been placed somewhere. But of course, they are often forgotten people. At one point in the book, you talk about how silence is a disease and how the refugees, particularly when they're in the camps, feel that they can't speak out very much, because if they do, they'll lose whatever tenuous hold they have on food and support from international organizations or from the host country. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, about the power of that silence and what your mission now is to do for refugees everywhere?
I think it was really hard for me to even write the book. I told my family, they were in refugee camp, I tell them, I'm going to write a book. So my mom, my dad, and my neighbors, they say, no, please don't write. If you write, you'll be killed. Because in refugee camp, we try to be grateful for anything we are given. the UN or the host community, you don't complain. I remember after I graduated high school, I got a job in refugee camp where I was teaching with other Rwandan teachers. I was paid less 10 times for their salaries. So they say, Dogon, you live in refugee camp, you don't pay electricity, you don't pay land, or you don't pay rent. So that's why we gave you 10 less time. So that kind of things, so nobody, and I couldn't complain because I say, if I say these, maybe I can be jailed, they can send me in the jail or do something bad for me. So we live in that kind of fear where we live, say, I'm a refugee, I can't say anything. So the silence, even everybody, in my community, the people where I'm from or the place where I grew up, 99% of them, they didn't go to school. I'm from Tutsi family where in Congo we had a huge land. We had cows. We were taking care of cows and cattle. We didn't take much of, so we didn't want to go to school. So we stayed in the forest and go there and live there. So my parents and many of them, they didn't go to school. So that's why they can't write, they can't read. They're there, they don't want to share also what they've been through. There's so many people in refugee camp, like many women who, after I graduated, I moved from refugee camp to another camp to collect stories of war and rape. And I wrote those stories down because I believed that when I wrote those stories, they could turn upside down the world for its sorrow and its hope. So it's amazing stories, but these people, they didn't go to school. They can't share their story, and they have fear to share that kind of everything they went through so that they can heal. So that's why the silence in refugee camp is killing people. A lot of people are dying for that kind of, fear and silence to keep what they've been through for more than 25 years, what they have seen. So they keep inside, all those stuff inside them. So it's not easy.
No. The silence of the people themselves who are going through this means that they aren't able to speak their stories. So others need to speak stories for them, which is part of your mission in life now, that you've found your way here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But you've found your way here, and you're using your voice in this book to be sure that people in this country and the rest of the industrialized West understand that refugees are people who have, by the system that we've installed, are kept silent all the time. And they're not allowed to speak out for fear of losing what little rights or livelihood they have. So your story, which is, of course, one story among millions of stories of refugees, but yours is the story that's told. You talk about surviving these traumas, and they were traumas. You watched your best friend beheaded in front of you. You survived a massacre by climbing into a pile of dead bodies. I mean, things like this would be horrific for anybody. And the way that you dealt with it, and I want you to talk a little bit more about this, the way you dealt with it was to make it the story. So how's that work for you? Does that continue to tell the story, or do you ever feel as if the trauma needs to be reconciled another way?
Yeah, when it comes about trauma, I remember when I was 3 years old, my uncle Kasasira was beheaded in front. So he was holding my hand, and one guy beheaded his head. I saw his head running down and speaking, and say, his hand. I'm so sorry. Sometimes when I remember all this kind of situation, I feel. So when I got to the kind of trauma, everybody in refugee camp where I come from, like, as you said, I saw my best friend, the guy who dreamed to be a pilot, another guy who dreamed to be a teacher. All these guys, they were killed. I was watching, I was seeing everything, and I was moved also. From there, I went also to Congo. I became a child soldier where I dragged a lot of dead bodies at battlefield, where a lot of people, if you try to escape from the rebel groups, when they caught you, you got killed. So there was a chair where you sit and they hit you, they hold the machete up and they bring it down on your head. So with all those kind of things, those are the things I saw or witnessed since I was young. So when I came in refugee camp in Gihembe, every night we don't have electricity in refugee camp. So that's the things I dreamed about every night. And like my family and my mom, everybody in my family during the massacre, they had also my mom and my dad and my siblings. They were hit machete and spiked clubs in their heads. So they were almost dying. They were taken to the hospital. And I was the only one because I was hiding in the latrine. And they were taken to the hospital. So when I remember everything I went through, it became still now. I remember when I was at NYU, there was a fire alarm every Tuesday. So I sometimes left the room, my dorm, running downstairs with only sometimes with naked, and people saw me, they cried because they didn't, the fire alarm, the fire alarm, that was the sign when people attacked the refugee camp, right, or when the rebel went to attack the village. That was the sign, the kind of sign they used. So that fire alarm reminded me of those things. So the trauma in refugee camp, everybody they still have that trauma, even me. But for me at least, when I came in America in 2016, when I started writing the book, I wrote the book and I felt I don't want to tell my story. I don't want to share my story to anybody because I don't want anybody to see me as a child soldier or as somebody who saw everything. But I want to be like any other guy, African student who is at NYU. And even till I came in 2017, but my best friend, I do have a lot of best friends of mine who are Americans and from China, from India, from Europe, but I never shared my story with them. So because of that kind of trauma, I didn't want to see them to see me the way I'm not because of the bias or this stereotype I've faced or I encountered. But the trauma, it helps me. When I wrote the book, at least, it helped me so much because I was be able to share my story. And I believe that sharing your story in a public way like this, it helps people like me to heal and feel kind of relieved. But people back home, they still have that problem.
Oh, they live with it, and you have managed to tell the story in a way that others can understand it who would not understand just how horrific this is over and over again. And I thank you for your courage, and I thank you for your ability to survive what has been a repeated trauma in your life and turn it into such a powerful story.
Thank you so much.
You know, of course, you're talking about those who you've lost, friends, family, and that, of course, is emblematic of people all over the world, refugees all over the world who've lost loved ones, names that we will never know. They're not just losing that life, but you're losing the dream. Like your friend who wanted to be a pilot was killed, as one example. My question next is, where was the UN in all this? You know, I particularly was thinking that question when I was reading about your survival from the first massacre. That was a UN camp. There were World Aid organizations there as part of the camp, and then suddenly the Hutus, you know, attack you. And what happened to the UN? Did they flee? Did they know this attack was coming?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I arrived in Rwanda 2 years after the genocide of Rwanda. So the UN, you know that the UN, they didn't intervene in Rwandan genocide. So there were kind of the UN, I remember the UN, like World Food Program, the UNHCR, but there were not many people there, and they were kind of afraid of coming into a country like Rwanda where the genocide was happening. I remember when I came to Congo, everywhere in Rwanda, there were dead bodies everywhere, on the street, in people's house, everywhere. You only see, something I remember was that everywhere there were dogs, the wild dogs, and also ravens taking bodies. So many people were not there, and the UN was there, but after the massacre, everybody left.
Yeah. And I think that's the part that we don't understand. We assume that there's some aid organization there that's caring for you all, and you were just abandoned.
Yeah, that's what people think. They see that maybe these UN tents, all the time UN is there, but it's not true.
They're not. Although you talk about the tents, the UN High Commission tents, which even after you started building more permanent housing in the refugee camps, the tents were still used for like, to go over the porch or something like that. You could never quite get rid of the tents. And you had dreams of the tents, which of course is very poignant. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your time in the Congo itself. So part of this story is that you go to Rwanda. The Congolese government comes back and says, listen, you can come back, we'll put you back on your land. And you, your brother, your older brother, Faustin, and your father take a bus and you go to the Congo, and then tell us what happens. You're put in a camp, and another camp inside your own country.
Yeah, I think in 2011, we arrived in Rwanda in 1996. So in 2002, so the Congolese government, they came to mobilize people to take them, say, Congo is now safe. You have to come back to your country. You have to repatriate to your country. So we give you your land and everything. And in refugee camp, we were taking, like me, myself, and everybody in refugee camp, we took one meal in 3 days. And the meal was only beans and corn. I did that for 25 years. So I remember we ate on Monday and also eat again on Wednesday. So people in refugee camp, like my dad who was a chief of village, who was kind of respected, everybody, including my family, they were living the past. They say, we are suffering here in refugee camp by my family, and yet we had a lot of things in Congo. We had cows, we had a huge land, we had everything. So people talked about how beautiful Congo, how they lost paradise. They lost their paradise. They called Congo lost paradise, but they never talked about what pushed them out of Congo. So in 2002, when Congolese government came to mobilize us, my family decided to go there. So my older brother Faustin, my dad, and I, so we went there. And when we got there, we expected to stay maybe there in the center or transit place for only 2 days, and they can take back to where we were born. But it was not that, it didn't happen. So we stayed there, and we realized that around us, there were rebel groups waiting us. So they wanted us to help the government of Congo and also rebel groups to fight. And my dad got jailed. He was jailed. My Faustin tried all their best. He found a way to go back to Rwanda. It was not easy. And I remained there by myself. And I was 12. Can you imagine staying in the forest I was 12 years old, and I kept going to school.
Yeah, you did.
So in the forest, I knew which way to take so that I may meet with the Congolese government or the rebel. So it was not easy, but that's how I found myself in Congo.
It's an amazing story that you managed to go to school when your father had gone to try to get back to your village, was jailed. Your brother went back to Rwanda, and there you were, a 12-year-old kid, all alone, inside Congo, and living basically you were living in that concrete house for a while, and then you were living in the forest, and you were going to school. Talk about dedication. I mean, that's amazing. It's an amazing story. And then eventually you do find your way back into Rwanda, realizing that the Congo is not safe. And you're helped by a pastor and his wife. Tell us a little bit about how they smuggled you back into Rwanda.
Yeah, there was another guy whose his name was Alphonse. His child was also a child soldier. He came all the way from Rwanda. He wanted to rescue his son, who was also joining the rebel group. And he came there, and my mom, who was in refugee camp, we were given $70 a month for food, for water, for everything. So my mom took half of the money for those $7. So he gave Alphonse, he said, if you find, because nobody knew I was alive. They knew because a lot of friends of mine, they were dead. They died. So they say, if you find my son, please try to bring him back to Rwanda. So Alphonse came, and it was not easy to cross Congo to Rwanda. All the way from Congo to Rwanda, there were roadblocks. So we had to stop, and the only way to escape was to pretend that I was a girl. So at that time, I didn't have beard. And I pretended as a girl, I put skirts and everything, and I changed the voice. I think my voice at that time was not as weird as it is today. And when I got to the roadblock, the people realized that we were Tutsis and we tried to escape. And that's how they dragged out of the bus, and they beat us. And Alphonse, we were like dying people. So that's how one guy who was working with Médecins Sans Frontières, that's what they say in French, which is like
Doctors Without Borders.
Mm-hmm. So he came and his wife, we were different from, they were not Tutsis like us. They came from different, they came from different other like ethnic group. They took us to their house. They treated our wounds, and they gave food. They gave the room. And when we got better, he tried to accompany us to the border, and that's how we got to Rwanda. But that guy, he was amazing.
Your story is full of these amazing moments where it's some ordinary, as you say, it's always, there's an ordinary person that makes the difference, and you find your way and you weave your way back. So you're back in Rwanda now. You've reunited with your family. Your father eventually rejoins you, and then it comes you work very hard at schooling because you realize this is the thing to do. You go to school, you're top of your class consistently, but you were always hungry. This is something I don't think Americans have any concept of. Talk about the hunger that was your constant companion for most of your life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when I came at NYU, as somebody who arrived in refugee camp in 1996, and I came to New York, to the States in 2017, only 4 years ago, I saw when I was working at NYU cafeteria, I saw how food was kind of everywhere was food. And when I was taking train going to school, I saw a lot of people on train eating. And for me, I only took one meal on Monday and ate again on Wednesday. I say, oh my God, a lot of people take things for granted, and when it comes for food, I say, when I see people who are taking granted food, I say, you don't know what you are playing with. So, and it was not easy to see, even for me, it took me 6 months to get used to eat like 2 meals. I drank a lot of water. I met a doctor. I went to see my doctor. I tell them, and also I met counselors. So they advised me because I had pain in my stomach. I was used to eat 1 meal in 3 days, and I got to the point where I would take breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which was kind of crazy for me to see everywhere food. And I had a meal plan where I go and swipe, I buy whatever food I want. Right. So all the time I say, at least if I find a way to take food and bring the food to my family in refugee camp. So, but here I was always hungry. Since I was 3 years old, since I became a refugee, always I was hungry. Still, people are there, and people will not be able to manage to come to America. They're still
hungry.
They're still.
Yep, hunger is the constant companion. And so it's pretty amazing that you were able to work your way through school, top of the class, pass the national exams, go on to Rwandan high school as a refugee, go on to the University of Rwanda. Tell us the story of how, the miracle as you call it, of how you found your way to the United States, without giving away too much, because we want you all to read the book.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you so much. I think I graduated, after graduating high school, but in high school I didn't have money, so in refugee camp we are eligible to study till 9th grade. And if you don't find somebody to fund you, you're screwed up. So you drop out of school. I got lucky, I went to high school, I played soccer. I was still young, I played really good soccer. I was a great soccer player. and the schools supported me, and I graduated. So when I went to college, they say, no, you are not eligible for financial aid. So I came back to a refugee camp, and I started teaching people instead of sitting around. And I met people, and they supported me. I went to college, I graduated. So I came back, and I tried to find a job, but it didn't work because I was a refugee. And that's how I started doing community services, where I was collecting stories. Something I mentioned, the area where I collected stories of women, particularly, because women, they played a big role in my life. They said, like my grandma saved me, my Auntie Florence, they saved me when people were going to kill. So they were killed to save me. So, and in 2016, I received a call. I met a guy whose name is Tim Armstrong. He's the former CEO of AOL. So he read the stories, my stories on the UN website, the great work I was doing, and say, I want to invest in you. I want to bring you to America. And I applied at NYU, and in 2017, in August, I found myself in New York City, one of the best places on the planet.
There you go. Just in case you were wondering, the Big Apple still has that allure. Mondiant, you talk about Tim Armstrong and his family who brought you over, but that's an exceptional story. I mean, as you say yourself, it's not possible to do that for everybody. And then at one point when you were in New York, you met the president of Rwanda, and he asked you what you wanted, and you said, I want a passport, because refugees don't belong to any country. They are, and even now, you don't have a passport. You traveled here on refugee documents and your acceptance to NYU. Can you tell us what would be the solution? I mean, you may have thought about this. What would be the solution to refugees around the world where they could, because it seems like having a country is the way that you find your way out, and refugees are caught. Tell us a little bit about that.
I got lucky. I had a very beautiful dinner with the president of Rwanda. So he came to New York. So I met him in Connecticut. There is, in Nantucket, it's a beautiful island in Massachusetts. So we had I had dinner with the president, a private dinner with a private meeting, and also we had dinner with President Paul Kagame. But to be honest, at that time, it was only a few months since I left Rwanda. It was in September, like 2 months or 1 month. I was still hungry, but I was not be able to take my dinner. If I meet again president, he will pay back my dinner. I didn't eat because I was facing. Can you imagine somebody who grew up in a refugee camp meeting? President Kagame was my idol, since he was like somebody I looked up to. He had been a refugee, things like that. Mm-hmm. So when I had dinner, I was not be able to grab my chicken. I was looking at his face. And the time came up and say, okay, the dinner is over. So I left my chicken over there, and I left. I said, President, okay. But when I met President, I said, President, he told me that he offered me citizenship. He said, Dogon, I told him I want a passport, and said, I want to give you citizenship. So I told him, President, are you going to give citizenship to everybody in refugee camp in your country, Rwanda? And he said, Dogon, that might be a long process. I say, President, thank you so much for that offer. I knew if you are able to give everybody a passport or citizenship, I will be more than happy also to take one. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, thank you so much for that offer. And I stood up, I came back to New York.
You stood in solidarity with refugees everywhere and declined the Rwandan citizenship.
Yeah, everybody. I think still now, I still use a refugee document I took from home in refugee camp. So whenever I got to the airport, I got stuck. So I do extra screening. They want to make sure I'm not a terrorist. So I had, because of documents, so everything, I think everybody all over the world, especially these people we see on TV or in news, these people we call refugees, they need to live. They need to live a life. They need just a place where they can feel they belong. That's all. And passport might be one of the things that show where you belong. Right. That's where everybody, and these more than 85 million That's the only thing they're looking for.
185 million refugees around the world. And of course, in our country, we know this story a little bit because of undocumented people who've come mostly from Central and South America, who are unable to even secure basic rights, such as refugees in Rwanda were unable to achieve. They couldn't get a job. They were denied financial aid to go to school, as you were, and you found a way through the perseverance of your family, who scraped together every little thing they could, and you worked very hard yourself, always staying top of your class to get on through, and then now you are in the States. So it's an amazing story, but it is not the story of most refugees around the world.
Yeah, nobody had a chance like I did. Not every refugee had Tim Armstrong in their life. Right. I think it's up to us, each and everybody all over the planet, to have that kind of empathy and listen and invest in these people. These people, refugee camps or these refugees are no longer people who are there. They are people who believe, who want to change the world and support, help this host community to make a world a better place for everybody. So if you invest, if you give the opportunity to these people, they can do great things. And these people are diamonds.
Yeah, they are. They are. The stories are amazing of family and friends who persevered and did amazing things, and they really are diamonds. And yet, the world throws them away. Wanted to ask you maybe one final question before we go to the audience and folks who are online and ask, is there something that we haven't talked about that you want people here and online to know?
Yeah, I think all of them, but I have one thing I want to tell about. As somebody who is highly educated among more than 100,000 refugees in Rwanda, I tried, and not only in Rwanda, all over the world. I came to New York, I graduated in 2019. And then I met a lot of people support me, like you, like other people. So I said, what can I do to support people I left behind? So I created my nonprofit organization called Mondiant Initiative. So there is a code there, it's called the Flow Code. If you go after the event, if you go there and you scan, you can learn a lot of things about the organization, about a lot of things we're working on. Maybe you can follow us on social media or other things. We need a lot of people to support and see what we do. And from there, we can change the world. So the only thing I want to talk about is Mondiant Initiative, my nonprofit organization to support refugees all over the world.
Right, the Mondiant Initiative. Well, congratulations on making it to here, to getting a master's in international education, which he managed to, not only did he put himself through school in Rwanda and through the University of Rwanda, but now he's got a master's from NYU, and he's carrying on what is brave and courageous work. And I think at this point I'll turn it back over to Jennifer to have us interact and get some questions.
Great, thank you so much. If anybody here in the audience wishes to ask Mondiant a question, just go up to the microphone that's on the stage right side or audience left side, and that way everybody at home will be able to hear your question. I do have, the person is asking me to type in the name of your nonprofit.
It's Mondiant, like his name?
Yes.
Initiative.
There you go. So do we have any questions from those of you here in the audience? Come on, I know you have a question. Just walk up to the microphone, please.
Hi. I'm just curious, the title of the book, what you mean when you say those we throw away are diamonds. What do you mean by that? What is that?
That's a really good question. I want to tell the people, the countries, or the people that deny or that they don't want refugees, that, if you let us come into your country, we be a diamond. We change a lot of things. We bring economy. We help you to grow economies. So I was telling people who don't want to let the refugees come into their countries.
Thank you so much. Okay, I will just say that we do have the, representatives from the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants here, if you want to wave it over there. And they can answer other questions that you have, and Mondiant will be here to sign books or book plates if we run out of the actual books. Don't worry, you can still purchase a book. We'll just get it to you a couple days later. And I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us and the world through this book and by coming to Westport. And thank you all for coming and sharing this story with us as well. So. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.